Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fitrah Muhammad. I'm the moderator for this 3-part program, Creating Community Wealth. So yesterday and last week, we heard from distinguished and accomplished panelists. Our first program was a discussion on the importance of keeping good financial records. The second program, we learned the impact and the magnitude of owning and operating a nonprofit community development corporation, a CDC. Today, we will hear from Joseph K. Williams, Sr., Senior Program Director, Mid-Atlantic Region for Enterprise Community Partners, Inc. This is the third part of our program and the final presentation. Please, let me encourage everyone listening, place your questions in the Q&A box. We want to make sure that Reverend Joseph has the opportunity to answer all of your questions. Welcome, Reverend Williams.
Thank you very much, Sister Muhammad. I appreciate you all allowing us to be here and to share. We've been looking forward to this since we had our initial discussion. I know that we are here in a very time-centered manner, and I want to make sure we get right to the work. So as I share my screen, I'm going to go through some slides. I promise you I won't bore you to death with them. I won't be that preacher that will talk a hole in your head, but I do want to make sure that I leave some nuggets in your ear as we are talking about an opportunity that I believe that allows for houses of worship and faith leaders to be able to impact not only their communities, but to leave a legacy that outlives the work that we intend to do while we're here on earth. So I'm going to talk about developing affordable housing and community facilities in partnership with faith communities. But let me tell you a little bit about Enterprise and who we are. Enterprise Community Partners. We are an organization with a vision and a mission that is simple, that every day one person will have an affordable home and a vibrant community filled with promise and the opportunity for a good life. Our mission is simple: to create the opportunity for low-income and moderate-income people through affordable housing in diverse, thriving communities. How do we do that? We have an approach that is through 3 buckets. Capital, meaning that Enterprise as a national organization in 11 different markets across the country has the opportunity to bring capital to a project, meaning that we are a CDFI, and we have a loan fund branch that is able to bring capital in terms of that, also capital in terms of the opportunities through grant dollars and the like, through policy. We want to make sure that in every place in this country that there are jurisdictions, there are municipalities that have on record policies that really help to allow affordable housing to happen in their area. You would be surprised on the number of dormant policies that exist and don't allow for the opportunity for affordable housing. I mean, and I don't have to tell you all, but if you just know enough that, redlining is real and it has happened, there needs to be policies that deal with that. There are covenants in certain neighborhoods in this community that don't allow for affordable housing. So then there needs to be policies to change that. And then we have a solutions area, which I am under. That's a programmatic element. I'm going to talk a little bit about that work through the lens of our faith-based development initiative. So
let me stop you for a second,
Sure.
Reverend Williams. When Imam Talib and the board, when we started our discussion on development, we got our first introduction to land development, faith-based land development from Enterprise. So that is where we began our relationship. I can't even remember when. I want to say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, but it was with Enterprise that we attended many of your seminars in order to better understand structure, the legal ramifications and information. So I just want you to know, and I want the listening audience to know, that while you're giving your presentation, I will be asking their questions. So please, to the listening audience, as Reverend Williams speaks, please place your questions, because he will be able to share the knowledge of faith-based development. Go ahead, Reverend Williams.
Thank you very much. And in fact, that's a good segue to what I really want to talk about in terms of Enterprise, again, in terms of our history. Enterprise was founded in what I call the faith encounter. So faith-based development is in our DNA. Our founder, Jim Rouse, was approached by some women when he was a member of the Church of the Savior in Northwest DC, Ward 1, and they wanted to buy their building. And they said to him, hey, they're getting ready to sell our building. We want to keep it affordable. We want to buy it. We want you to help us to do this. Like any developer, he ran the numbers and he said, the numbers don't work. I don't think that I can really be of any help to you guys. They came back sometime later and said that we have put down a deposit on our building that is non-refundable. Now, we've done what we're going to do by faith. What are you going to do? He had an aha moment and said, hey, I wonder what would happen if, in fact, that we put the knowledge of community development together through faith and put that in action and see what would take place. So
I have a question.
Go ahead. What's your question?
And I am going to be stopping you along the way.
And
a little fast, so slow it down a little bit. Let me ask you this question. Is there a criteria for calling yourself a faith-based house of worship? Is it just enough to open the doors and say, you know, we have a congregation, or is there a set of criteria that you must meet in order to be considered a faith-based house of worship?
To be a house of worship in most municipalities, when you register the name of the entity, you register it nationally with the federal government, the IRS, to get your EIN, to then apply for a 501c3 that allows you to have. And when you apply for that 501c3, that is where you will have the designation under that statute. You have the designation as a faith entity, and it lists the 501c3 lists a number of identifying factors that says X, Y, and Z, and generally that's where the faith-based organization falls under. But yeah, because when you do it in the municipality as well, you will have to register it locally. You will have to have you will have to have bylaws. You will have to have a constitution. You will have to have all those documents in order to do it. Yeah, there are some people who just go do it. But at the same time, you want to do it right. You want to make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's, both federally and locally. So I'm going to get to this whole congregational development piece, but I want to talk about the role in community economic development. I want to talk about the mobilization and delivery through viable options, the importance of creating external partnerships as well as an internal team, and the complement and challenge of ministry goals and community revitalization. There is a difference in wanting to feed the hungry and clothe those in your community than when you talk about doing a community development project that involves actually looking at your physical footprint or developing some land that you have. And then I want to talk about some proven practices and recent innovations. And Sister Muhammad, you know, I told you I was going to speed through a little bit because when I get to the nuggets, I'm going to slow down. But I want to share this with you. And our market, the Mid-Atlantic market, like I said to you, is one of 11. Our footprint is Maryland, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. But we are a national organization that is across the country. We started the Faith-Based Development Initiative work back in 2006. In fact, I like to tell the story. So I've pastored here in the District of Columbia. I've been in ministry for over 37 years. And when Enterprise wanted to do the Faith-Based Development Initiative, I was the board chair of the East of the River Clergy Police Community Partnership. And we were the community organization that came alongside and helped to get this initiative going. And the work that we have done since 2007 is more than 2.5 billion. That's enterprise itself in the Mid-Atlantic market, resulting in more than 37,000 units. One of the things that I like to tell people is that our work with houses of worship is about building a community impact structure or affordable housing.
Okay.
So we generally like to say that we don't do work to help to build a sanctuary or to build a temple or to build a mosque. Now, not saying that that can't come out of your opportunity, but it's not where we spend our energy. So what we do is a call to action. We call them clarion calls. Our clarion calls is a training. You talked about this, Sister Muhammad, where you said that you come to a lot of our trainings. Our trainings are free, and when we're not doing them in a cohort setting. But we do offer these regular trainings throughout the year. We talk about the visioning process, the nuts and bolts of development, how to access public and private resources and dollars. And we talk about the infrastructure and accounting, asset management, et cetera. We bring capital to the table, as I mentioned, that we have grants. We do grants for a market analysis feasibility study. Sometimes a market analysis feasibility study can go anywhere from $7,500 to $15,000. And we'll do a $10,000 grant asking the house of worship to do a 25% match. That it doesn't come to us, it goes to the vendor. So that, because and you'll hear me talk about this in a moment, but the importance of understanding what the market says that you can do where you are and understanding the feasibility of being able to do it is vital. You can have a vision, but if you don't have an understanding with that vision, then you'll end up wasting dollars and maybe spending good money after bad. We also do recoverable early pre-development grants. A recoverable grant is the opportunity whereby, and we have to fundraise to make this happen. So I want to tell you this: I wish I would say that I can lift my eyes up and God would just drop it all down, but I got to go have some conversations with some people as well to get them to believe in this work. But these grants are the opportunity for us to help in the pre-development process. And what makes them wonderful is it's not a loan, it's a grant. And if in fact that the house of worship that is not able to move forward with this project, meaning that you can't get a construction loan, you can't do all those things that push you to the next level of the pre-development process, then that grant has the opportunity to be forgiven. If the project does go forward, you build a capital stack. You'll hear me talk about this. You build a capital stack, you're able to get a construction loan, then those dollars can be put back into the system so that we can then help somebody else. And of course, I've talked about the full range of enterprise and the products that we have from our loan fund, from the opportunity to be able to connect with us through our own development arm, because we have a development arm called the Enterprise Community Development. So we are a large organization with many tentacles that help in doing the work.
So let me stop you for a second before you go on. So you have a certain area that you're responsible for. What other areas of the country in the US where Enterprise is located? Is it by regions?
Right, so we call them markets, but you're right.
Okay.
They're by regions. So we have like the Gulf Coast that does North Carolina, Georgia, and South Carolina and Florida. We have, the Gulf Coast. I'm sorry, let me take that back. That's the Southeast region that we have that does South Carolina, Georgia, Atlanta, and Florida. Then we have the Gulf region that does the New Orleans area, Mississippi. In that area, we have offices in Seattle, we have offices in California, we have a Midwest region, and in the sense that covers Ohio, Detroit, and I'm probably leaving a couple out, but we cover almost all the map of the states in the country.
And let me ask another question. So to get involved with Enterprise, does a faith-based community need to already own the land, or can they be looking at purchasing land?
It's important to have site control. I would tell you that that's the criteria. The criteria is to have site control. So that is owning the land or in an acquisition position of the land. And being in an acquisition position, there's variables to that. So for an example, you can have an LOI with the intent to purchase, but in order for us to really begin to work with you, you want to have site control, you want to own the land, because if you can't say, I'm gonna get that parking lot one day, and that doesn't mean that you can't come to the training. So I want to be clear. You can come to the training, but there is no investment of capital if in fact that you don't have site control.
Okay, so you just said something very important. You said, but they can come to the training.
That's right.
And I don't want to jump in front of you. So if you tell me that you have a slide that will explain some of the things that I'm asking, you can just let me know. So, but I'm going to ask my question because I'm asking questions that I know that we had when we first got started. So when you say you can come to the training, if you're not a landowner already, and you might be apprehensive because you've never purchased land before, and you're using the funds of the believers, what kind of training is available?
So, and I am going to talk about that, but what I would tell you is that we do everything from. So tonight you're going to hear me talk about Development 101.
Okay.
The areas that it's going to be an overview of the elements of development. Those elements alone each have a training component to it. Okay. All right. So when I talk about site control, I'm going to talk about terms of what it means as it relates to community development. That's information that's important for you to know. When I talk about, you hear me talking about a joint venture agreement. Again, that's another term, but there's a training to let you know what that relationship is all about. Okay. When I say, you hear me say something called LIHTC. All right, that's the low income tax credits. Again, those are terms and things, and they each have a training component with them because development is a journey. It is not a sprint.
I'm here to tell you, I'm here to attest to that.
It is not a sprint. And I will say this to people, that development is hard. It's not easy.
No.
But it's doable. And you have to know, one of my colleagues has said this in a couple of our training sessions. He has said that development is gangster. And if you don't become gangster, you're going to get gangstered. And so it is important to understand that you have to have, information is knowledge and knowledge is power. We know that, but you have to have the information. We do a cohort. We did a cohort in Baltimore. We have a cohort going on right now in the District of Columbia for 17 houses of worship. And I will tell you that people know now what they did not know.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. So the training is to really help you to come into the knowledge. And we've been doing this, like I said, since 2006. We've done it for over 780 houses of worship. We've done it, in terms of the work that we have done and started connecting with individuals and trying to make sure that people have the opportunity and the insight. And so I talked about technical assistance, the trainings, understanding what an organizational development assessment is. I remember when Imam Sharif was at our summit that we did back in November, and he was thankful for the organizational assessment document. Yes. He said 9 pages deep is what he said, 9 pages deep, but it's 9 pages that helps you to understand what it is that you need to do. And so you'll hear me talk about zoning and the market analysis, the visionary and the feasibility studies, and specific project development TA is what we do. We have a bullpen. We have a bullpen of consultants. We call, legal services, pro bono services. We have a bullpen of development consultants, architects, you name it. We have the range of professionals who are able to be here for you.
Let me stop you again. So you talked about the assessment. That's very important. And I don't want you to just jump over that, because you know, you've already made it very clear, and I can attest to the fact that development is not easy, especially if it's your first. There's so many unknown, and so many of the players in development know so much more than you. You
That's
don't
right.
know, you really need legal advice and training in order to just know the questions to answer. But I want to talk about the assessment for a second,
Mhm.
because Enterprise does provide a very comprehensive assessment, 9 pages. But the assessment, please share with the audience what the assessment is for and what it accomplishes.
So the assessment document, we call it an organizational assessment tool, an organizational assessment document that we give to the faith leaders and their team, is to really walk down. It's an opportunity to create a strategic approach to community development, and it lets you know where you are. I like to say that, you know, it will give you the opportunity to become comfortably conversant in the process. Our vice president for the Mid-Atlantic market likes to say it will help you to make a go or no-go decision. And I will say this to you, that that assessment tells you where you are and tells you where you aren't. So it will ask you questions about, do you have a community development corporation?
Yes.
It will ask you questions. Have you signed a joint venture agreement? Do you have a developer? All right. Have you had a market analysis and feasibility study? Have you had any other analysis, whether it is a soil analysis or whether it is an environmental analysis? Do you have a development team? You know, how much money do you have? Are you prepared to bring to the project? Do you have, you know, if you do have a CDC, is it a CDC of an ongoing concern? What do I mean by that? Is it a working, viable CDC with a board, has its own bank account, and is doing things? So it's not just an entity that is set up on paper. Is it a real active organization? So our assessment, and I jokingly say to people when we're in the room together, Sister Muhammad, I'm gonna give you this assessment. I want you to fill it out. I want you to take 2 weeks with it. And please know that NA means no answer, and that's not applicable. Okay, so
And listen, you're being very kind, because I won't tell you how long it took us to answer it, but in reality, the bottom line is that the assessment will tell you what you don't know.
that's right.
And the
That's right.
questions that you have never asked yourself. And it really lets you know that you are probably not prepared and you need to get prepared. So these seminars that are offered are invaluable. So you're being very kind, but I have to tell it like it is.
Well, it is, but
Answer
you know, it does. And what's important is, because you know, I don't want to quote unquote scare your audience, but I do want you to understand that you do have to take this process seriously,
Yes.
because it is an expensive lesson to learn. It is an expensive lesson to learn, and you don't want to be in a position where you allow somebody to take advantage of you, or that you go and spend money that you shouldn't have spent at that particular moment because you weren't ready for it. You know, so, you know, for example, you asked, well, does a faith organization have to own the property? Well, yes. But why would you then ask for money for a feasibility study on a property that you don't own?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So, and while there is a due diligence period sometimes in the acquisition process, but again, that due diligence is around some other factors and mitigating factors that you have to consider. And it's important for you to understand which way you ought to go. So let me jump right into this,
Okay.
and talk about the opportunity that is before us. So development and stewardship go hand in hand, in the sense that, you know, it's important for us to be a good steward over what we have. We realize that everything belongs to God, and that God has entrusted us with our houses of worship into the keeping of the people and the like. But what's more important for us to understand is that as we get into this process, that we'll be managing the affairs and the dollars of others.
Yes.
And that is important for us to understand, that being a agent for others and being a fiscal agent is vital, and understanding what that responsibility is. Additionally, we need to understand that we need to be planning for what I call the lifestyle of the property, all right, of the house of worship property. What does that mean? How do we maximize the property assets in a way whereby we can build a community impact structure? That's vital and important as you think about the development process. When you talk about property stewardship tools, we're talking about understanding the need for, here's just some things you have to think about when you think about development. You know, you have to think about a capital plan. You got to think about the capital schedule. You got to think about the capital budget. You got to think about the fact that you're going to have a maintenance budget. You're going to have a replacement, a reserve replacement. And so, which means you got to have a strategic plan. You have to have a strategic plan as you go at doing this. These are some basics as it relates to understanding development. The other piece of it is that I will share this with you. When you are thinking about the action steps of development, first of all, you have to be organized. So we talked about the Community Development Corporation.
Yeah.
One of the things that I will say, Sister Muhammad, is that you need to, we strongly encourage you and to develop what I call a firewall organization, and understand what the legal relationship between the Community Development Corporation is and the house of worship and the mosque in this case. And I will say this, that it's important for you to understand that the need for having a real estate attorney. And I tell people, I won't tell you what to do. I'm not an attorney, but if I were an attorney, I would advise you on making sure that that legal structure is in place. Because when you go back to that document that I just mentioned to you about the organizational assessment, you know, there's things that you're gonna have to do. You need to do a building needs assessment. And so if you have a property that's aging and you wanna redevelop it, or you want to turn it into a community impact structure, or you wanna change what you're using for worship, for an example, and then build some houses of affordable housing on the back of it, what are the needs? And so you bring in somebody that will help you do a needs assessment. You have to understand the importance of planning. All right.
I have to stop you for a second because I need you to elaborate just a bit more. It's extremely important. As a matter of fact, this week in the Study al-Islam newsletter, it's going to be a document from a lecture given by Imam Warithuddin Muhammad. May he be in the highest place in paradise. And he advised us to stop having businesses under the masjid. And you're gonna talk a little bit more about this when I finish my point, because of the legal ramifications of the house of worship being separated from, or the CDC representing the business separate from the house of worship. And because you are a voice of knowledge, I want you to explain that a little further, the protection that the CDC gives to the house of worship.
And that's a good point. So you heard me use the term the firewall organization. The firewall organization is an entity that is set up between the house of worship and the development project. So in this case, you would want to have your CDC, your Community Development Corporation. And again, an attorney may tell you an LLC or something else, but you want that to be the entity that takes the burden and responsibility of the development work and project. So everything, if it is, the Blessed Community Development Corporation, that is a part of, Mosque number 7 or whatever it is, you would want that to be an associated entity with the mosque. You would do what we call a legal grounding memorandum of understanding between the two entities. And so if the mosque owns the land, then the mosque will give permission to the CDC to do the development of the land and play a role in the relationship of the CDC, because the CDC is going to have its own board. The CDC is going to have its own bank account. The CDC is going to have its own initiation documents, whether for its 501c3, is the CDCs are going to have to be a registered entity in that local municipality. And it's going to, your CDCs generally have not just members of the mosque that are part of the congregation that are part of the board, but you will have community members on, well, that can represent your interests and it'd be like-minded individuals. And you set that organization up. That organization will have the responsibility of filing all the tax documents just like anyone else would, because you, even though you are a nonprofit organization, you still have tax documents that you have.
And that is the bottom line. And I'm saying this to the Masjid and the imams that are on the line. And I'm sure they all know this, but I'm going to say it anyway for even the community members. The bottom line is that the Masjid is not at risk of being taken if something goes wrong in the deal.
That's right. That's exactly
right. The Masjid is protected. When you open a nonprofit community development corporation to oversee your business entities. And before we go on, I have a question from the audience. What are the examples of community impact projects?
So a community impact structure, a community impact project could be a school. It can be a supermarket. It could be a what do we call those small clinics now that we could emergency clinics where you go to. It could be a clinic. It could be anything that that is outside. It could be a banquet hall. It could be a daycare. It could be a dry cleaner. It could be something that the entity wants to do that has the opportunity, because you'll hear me talk about the mixed use of a property. It could be the opportunity for you to take an affordable housing project, add a daycare at the bottom, and add a pharmacy at the bottom as a part of the use. So those are the kinds of things that the community impact structures are.
And which is what we're doing. The Clara, which is the project that we just broke ground on, does have those commercial properties at the bottom, which services the community. That's
right. That's right. And so that's the key point, is that these entities service the communities, and let's understand this too, that they can service the community, and it's okay to have a fee structure with that as it relates to it. It can be something that meets the need in the community as well. But so a daycare, people have to pay to be at the daycare. Daycare doesn't run, without finances. So again, it's understanding the importance of a community impact structure.
Yes.
So I talked about planning a little bit. I want to talk about this. So I mentioned the term a joint venture agreement. Yes. That is when an entity comes together with a developer and they create a joint venture agreement to do a community development project. So in other words, the developer brings their balance sheet, the faith entity brings the land, and they develop an agreement, joint venture, together to do the development on this project. And there's, again, the importance of having a real estate attorney to understand what the structure of that agreement is. Right. Because if you don't understand how that should be, there are certain things that you have to look at. So I'll give it to you this way. If I'm the developer, if I'm developer A, and I'm coming to you and you have the land, and I say to you, I'm going to do this, we're going to use my balance sheet, we're going to use your land. And then you're going to say, so will I own it? Will I keep my land? Am I selling you my land? What am I doing here? And then that's when you'll have your legal advice to let you know, here's how this process works. Always on your side of the table, there should always be an attorney and a development consultant to help you to develop your, what I call your joint venture agreement. Because the developer has a bottom line. And so you need to understand the developer's bottom line and your bottom line as well, and what you need to get. So the negotiation with the developer is important. And that's why it's important for you to know what you need to know. That's why it's important for you to do that assessment. That's why it's important for you to do the training. That's why it's important for you to learn the information, because it will then give you the ability to, I would say, to level the playing field a little bit.
And let me just add to that, Reverend, and the good thing about what's going on between this discussion right now is that you and I represent those entities. You as a developer, and on my side, being a part of a faith-based community that is looking to develop. And so many times those faith-based communities, out of fear, don't get involved and take advantage of opportunities because they don't have the knowledge. And so a developer brings the knowledge and credibility, which is really why you need an attorney and a consultant. No doubt about it. Don't go sitting at any table with a developer without an attorney. But in putting it in simpler terms, if the development takes $40 million, what bank is going to loan you $40 million if you can't on your own borrow $100,000? So that developer is really someone that you are a partner to, but you need them in order to get in the game.
And that's right. But what's important to understand is that you're right, because you talk about using someone else's balance sheet. And that's what we use that term. The developer brings a balance sheet. The developer brings the capital and the know-how to make something happen. But you need to understand the importance of your role as a faith entity, right? Because you have the land. And you know, we like to say here in the District of Columbia, they're not making no more land.
Right.
They're not building no more land. So who has the land now to address, you know, the affordable housing needs? Houses of worship. Houses of worship have the land, and you have to understand what you bring to the table. So that's why I said earlier that, you know, that the development process is gangster, and if you don't become gangster, you get gangstered. And so the developer can come to you, and I've seen it happen. I have horror stories where houses of worship have sold their property over to a developer for nothing, and I mean little of nothing, and find themselves just out, and it's not pretty. Or I've seen a facility that could have gone to affordable housing to address the need of a particular you know, community, whether it's for seniors, for veterans, or whomever, and now, you know, we have one right here in the city that's facing the Capitol, that's going to go from a house of worship to an alternative gentleman's club. And that is just shouldn't happen. So you got to understand the importance of that's why you develop your own, assemble your development team. Internally, you should have people who understand the development process that are part of your team. That includes your development consultant. It includes your attorney. So that you will how to have these conversations with the developer. And you got to know when. That's why the training is important. So I'm going to mention a couple of things quickly, and I'm going to move to the next slide. But you got to understand what the zoning process is in your area.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you again, if you don't understand, let's say that you just decide, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get me a zoning attorney so I can go ahead and figure that out before I do any market analysis feasibility study. Well, you just spent money out of place, and you find yourself now, I'm gonna say not broke, but you're gonna find yourself with a deficit budget, because that money that an attorney is gonna cost you to do zoning is a per hour that you don't want to expend until you've grown to the place of knowing that you need that. It's important of knowing when to do what you need to do. So for example, I've had people get a market analysis, did not get a market analysis or feasibility study, but get architectural drawings. Well, why would you spend money on an architect? Why would you spend, you know, $7,000 on an architect to do drawings of something that you don't even know if the market can support.
That's right.
Or if your property is ready for development. You might have a World War II ammunition thing in the ground, but you don't know that yet. So again, it's important to understand how to put things in a sequential process that the pre-development process supports. And what we do with our training is we help to walk you through that. One of the faith leaders in our DC cohort said to me, and we have them to make a presentation to a Shark Tank. The Shark Tank is a developer, it's a finance person, and it's the head of the housing authority, the housing department. And you present your project and you get critiqued on it. That is so helpful because you can be the best visionary, but if you don't know how to put together a pro forma, that's the document that delineates the cost, the budgeted cost, the acquisition cost, all the cost of a project, then you can't go talk to a bank about a construction loan. You can't go. Yeah. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your point, and then I have.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you have to know how to put together a presentation that has all the right components that will demonstrate what the project is going to do, what the impact is going to be, how much is this going to cost, and who is it going to take to help to get you across the finish line.
I have a question, and then I want to ask two questions from the audience. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My first, well, actually, it's a statement. One of your early seminars that me and other executive staff members from the Masjid attended, you gave us this rollout of a step-by-step development, where we should be in the process, what the next step is. Are you still making that available?
Yes, we do. We still have that. Yes, and I can get that to you.
That is a critical document because it takes you from the very beginning of the phase to the very end of the phase, and it prepares you for where you should be in the beginning and what the responsibilities that you must meet in the next phase. I can't remember how many phases it was, but I do know it was in phases, and it was very helpful to us.
Right. So one of the things that we do, one of the next steps, Sister Muhammad, that we do when you talk about development 101 process, there's a continuation of this and what we do. Tonight is to whet your appetite, to kind of give you an overview of things. But like part of what you're asking is this outline here talks about the visioning, working with the congregation, making the physical asset and needs assessment, looking for the growth opportunities, how to blend in your mission and your programs along with it. What are the finances that are going to be necessary, and what are the community needs? And so that's part of it. So for an example, when you get your market analysis and feasibility study, a very important first step. All right. Your next step would not be to go talk to the community about your project because you don't know what it is that you're going to do. Exactly. So your next step now in the pre-development process will be saying, okay, so now that I've gotten the market analysis feasibility study, do I need to get an environmental study? Is there necessary for a soil test or et cetera? So are there any land use tests that we need to figure out? And then once we do that, then do we need to are we now ready to bring the concept to paper and get some architectural drawings? All right. And now that we know that we have this, okay, so is there going to be a need for a zoning variance to need to be done? So those are the kind of things that we talk about. Yes. and the processing of what you do.
I have two questions I have to ask from the audience. The first one is, how does the developer make a profit?
I'm gonna say very easily, no.
It's a very long time before he makes a profit, but go ahead.
So again, a developer who's trying to do an affordable housing project, first of all, the benefit of a developer working with a faith entity, a house of worship, is that they are able to help. We would use this term called the capital stack.
Right.
you are able to help to bring some things to the capital stack that a for-profit developer can't get. There are new market tax credits. There are low-income tax credits. There are other tax breaks that you bring as a nonprofit entity. All right. The developer will then help to use those to build a capital stack. And then at what I call the turnkey moment, because those tax credits.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
All right. The tax credits all have what we call a window with them, a 15-year window that then have to be refinanced and repaid, and the developer pretty much will get their money, their development fees on staggered pieces as they go along. Now, with that said as well, again, that joint venture agreement document is going to dictate what the amount of money that all entities will get in it. And now, affordable housing is a costly venture, and you got to have a developer who has a heart to want to do it. All right.
Yes.
And the developers will tell you that doesn't pencil out for me. That doesn't help me. Yada yada yada. Well, you find yourself a developer who's in it and knows how to make money. And you raise a point. You want to work with an experienced developer.
Yes. Yes.
You want to work with an experienced developer. I mean, you don't want to work, if you're trying to get something done, you don't want to work with somebody who's trying to figure it out just like you are. And you, again, the important thing is how you make sure you come to the table full of the knowledge and understanding the role that you have and the opportunity that you bring to the table. You know, I tell faith leaders this all the time. You are a valuable asset, and you need to understand that you are just as important in this process as the developer's bottom line is, developer's balance sheet is, and don't be made to feel any other way. It is important. That's why we call it a joint venture agreement. And you agree, you figure out. I always encourage faith leaders to stay in the deal. All right. I do. And that's probably just because of who I am, because I know that you have the opportunity to reap the benefit of staying in the deal and owning the property as you go forward. The other piece of that for me on a personal note is that it gives you the ability to I talked about legacy earlier, to have a lasting legacy beyond your years that goes to generations and generations to come. And you're teaching subsequent generations how to do this business work to make an impact in their community. Because that's why we're here. At the end of the day, you know, we worship God, but we worship God through our actions and through our efforts and impacting our community. And that's what's important.
I have another question from the audience. If you have a board of the CDC and an executive director that is a developer, if the developer has been incarcerated for mortgage fraud, will that hurt the CDC getting started?
I think that's a credibility issue.
Yes.
That's a credibility issue. And you have to, I always like to tell folks, you need to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. You have to figure out, I can't speak to that specifically in the sense of saying, yeah, that's going to hurt you. I think you have to figure out what's in the best interest of your entity. Now, I would say this to you, when you are looking at going to acquire funding, whether it's grant funding or whether it's financing, all right, the backgrounds of the people who are your leaders are going to be scrutinized. They're going to be scrutinized. And you got to ask yourself, is that the best foot forward that you can put? I'll tell you a true story. We started an entity. I won't say name the entity, but we started this entity. Some clergy got together some years ago and started an entity. And one of the leaders that helped start the entity with us, when we went to try to get some money from a foundation, they said, hey, we'll give you some money, but the person who you have leading your entity, we won't do it as long as they're there. So that's a business decision, you know. So and you think about how it impacts your business. So I hope I answered that in a straight way to say you need to count the cost of that and to see how that really impacts your organization.
But it's also, I have to say this because it's also, do you want to win? And it really is. And if you know that people are stacking the deck against you, and you already know that, why would you give them reasons to reject you? And now you got more of a battle. I got so much gray hair from this development project. I'm not looking to take on a fight that I don't need. My grandmother used to say, pick your fights.
Yeah.
That is such a true statement. And I mean, it's a matter of whether you want to develop the project or not. And you know, the banks already, the people, the players, you know, you don't get
they're not going to look at you. They're not going to take you seriously. I mean, the question is, do you want to be taken seriously?
Yes. And if you have people that you can put out, it's just like what you're talking about with the developer. You need to get, you know, there's a saying in Islam, and I kind of differ with it. There's a saying in Islam that says, trust in God, but tie your camel. I kind of differ with that, because if you trust in God, then you know God has already provided the information for you, and you need to trust the information and that has been provided for you by God. You don't go into these kinds of deals without an attorney.
That's right. That's right. That's
important.
right. And you think about it this way, you know, it's one of the points that I make here. If you want to do what I call the value of goodwill in the community, well, goodwill is also represented by integrity.
That's right.
It's represented by integrity. So again, I would look at that. If it were me and I knew that, yeah, that person wouldn't be on my board.
I mean, you know, Reverend, we're not going to get into that because that's a whole nother conversation, because, you know, because our community of color has been arrested for so many things that others have not been arrested for. And we know that. So it's really more of, do you know how to play the game? If you don't know how to play the game, you're never going to advance. You're not a good leader, because if you know that the deck is stacked against you, don't give the enemy a reason to reject.
That's right. That's right. And
that's,
you know,
the bottom line.
That's the bottom line. That's right. And I would tell you this, one of the things that, you know, that for considerations that people need to think about is that this is an investment. Right. So how do you maximize the investment?
Exactly.
How do you create a partnership that's going to provide equity and opportunities for all that are involved? Exactly. How you can get the greatest return and maximize that return on your property and your investment? You know,
exactly.
What are going to be the needed financial guarantees? All right. And then, you know, again, I go back to this you have to respect and maximize the fair market value of your property. And you have to know what that is before you can start and do anything. It's going to be important for you to be able to make that happen. And so I tell people all the time, you know, you talk about being involved in the project. So what are the deal documents? Right. What's the letter of intent? You know, what's the development agreement? What's the, you know, what is the agreement of sale if you're going to sell your document?
Yes.
What is the, you know, the joint venture agreement that you need to create as well? And then the operating agreement of the joint venture agreement. See, these are terms that you learn in the training. Exactly. And that you come to understand. So when a developer comes up to you and starts talking this language, you are able to be sure that you can know what they're talking about. and know how to go about it. I'm going to bring this. I'm going to kind of be getting ready to land the plane. So I'm going to talk about some lessons that we've learned, and you've mentioned some of this. So unfamiliarity with the development process and fear of the unknown often leads to no action by houses of worship.
Exactly.
All right. And so that's why the training is important. We know that extensive technical assistance is often needed. It helps you to understand, to build your capacity, to understand, and that technical assistance can come in, somebody helps with organizational development. The technical assistance can come in from a legal arm. That technical assistance can come from a development consultant. That technical assistance can come from an enterprise, for an example, that helps to walk you through the process, you know? And never ever underestimate the need for intellectual capital. Never do that. You know, the go or no go decision. I have an organization right now, a house of worship right now. They have gone through the trainings, and now they're trying to get it before the congregation to make a determination if they can go forward. All right. And they've done a lot of work. They've done a lot of training. And so now, but they're now prepared to speak to it, you know, from a knowledge-based position, because they have walked through the training, gone through the early part of the pre-development process, and they're now ready to move to the next phase. You know, the importance of timelines. I always tell folks, you know, faith communities and developers on a different time. that's just a reality. You know, we deal with a whole different kind of time, a different perspective. And so, you know, the faith leader needs to cast the vision, get the buy-in from the congregation. The faith leader needs to have somebody that's going to handle the day-to-day responsibility and authority of the development process. That's why that team is important. And then you need to make sure, and you know, overall that there's an evaluation process that takes place of what you're doing. And you need to make sure that you are listening to the needs of your community.
Very important. Let me just say, you know, one of the major decisions that Imam Talib made was he was very transparent, and he came before the community often, even though much of the information that he was sharing with the community, I didn't understand in the beginning. So I know some of them did not understand. Our older community who trusted him and trusted the executive staff and trusted the board. But no matter what he did, he always came before the community and let them know step by step exactly what was happening in the process. And so your point of making sure that the community knows and they're not lagging behind is extremely important. And one other point that you made, and I think Kofi in our first presentation, she talked about, both of she and Dr. Daniel talked about, there's a lot of documents needed. So we had a board, but then a development committee was formed, and this development committee was separate from our board, and this was made up of community members that understood development from some level, maybe not all of it, but from some level, and all of them together kind of made up the whole pie. And so Imam Talib and the board, they listened to them in terms of making some decisions. So this is not a one-man show.
No, it's not. And you know what? Because it's for the community, it has to be done in community. One of the things that you're going to learn is that in the process, that when you are, no matter where you are in this country, you're going to have the community approval to do a project. Yes. All right. You're going to have the community approval. So before you even, if you are dealing with what we call housing trust fund dollars that are part of a municipality from the housing Department of Housing and Community Development or Department of Housing, however it's referred to, You will have to understand that before you can even have that application process with them, whatever your community entities are, you're going to have a, to be sanctioned by them. They're going to have to know what your project are, which means is, which then begs the question, are you a good community partner now?
That's right.
Because if you're not a good community partner now, you can't show up and say, I'm going to build.
That's
and
right.
they're going like, who are you and where you've been? And why should we support you? And so it's important for houses of worship to be good community partners, for that faith leader to be in the community, attending meetings and be known. All right. You don't have to be well known, but be known. Be known for the work and the impact that you do. And that's important because the need is so great. The need, if you're in a place like, if you're in a highly gentrified city, like the District of Columbia, all right, the need is so great. People can't afford to stay here. I read somewhere the other day, just to have minimum housing in DC without, our government assistance, you have to make $90K. Now, the median level income in this area is higher because we include the Virginia and Maryland. But when you think about it just for the district by itself, the median area income is probably somewhere around 56K. So, again, to be able to afford to stay here is important. And that's why we encourage houses of worship to get involved. Identify leadership within your congregations and then take advantage of key partnerships, whether it's with enterprise, a university, other development communities. Build a collaboration.
That's right.
Build a coalition so that you can begin to figure out how to take your facility, and I call this the pandemic pivot. Take your facility that you now are going to have to look at, how often is it going unused right now?
Right.
And how many people are really making their way back to use the facility that you have? And is there a better way for you to realize or to reestablish your footprint for the better use of the community? That is vital and important.
I got to stop you for a second because someone is asking, can you please present the slideshow so that they can see a full screen and not an edited screen or a half screen? I'm seeing it, but this person is asking if you are able to do a full screen. I don't know how to do that, Reverend, so I can't help you. While you're trying to,
that's too much.
Yeah, that is too much.
How is that?
No, go back down a little, Reverend. You know what? Right there is enough.
Right there?
Yeah, no.
Down?
I'm sorry. Yeah, make it a little smaller because we're not, you're cutting off the top of your screen.
Oh, I got it.
Okay.
How is that?
If you go to
right
slideshow, you could put it in presenter mode.
Oh. See, that's why we have you. That's why we have her. I told you.
Yes.
Straight. I told you to get it straight. So, so what should I do? Can I do that in shared screen?
Yep. At the top it says slideshow. You should see slideshow at the top next to animations. Yep. Slideshow. Keep going.
Up a little further, Reverend. Up a little further.
Oh, you know what? I gotta move this. I got my bars in the way. Let me go. Here we go.
Okay, but while you're doing that, if you can do two things at one time, one of the audience is asking, can the community development 101 outline be accessed from your website?
What's the question again? I just put it in slideshow now, so I think that makes it better.
Okay, the community development 101 outline. Can that be accessed on your website? Or
that is not on our website.
Okay.
No, that is something that we do. That's a training that we offer.
Is there a cost for the training?
So the short answer is we do free trainings. The long answer is if we do a cohort, then we work together to figure out the cost of that. And our cohort has a range of, and I've shared some of that with you. Our cohort has a range of costs. If you just want a Development 101 training, we can work to make that happen for you in a 2-hour session. If you want something deeper than that, then you will want to create a cohort that will, like this cohort that we have now for these 17 houses of worship. We were fortunate to be funded by Wells Fargo and fortunate to get money from the DC Department of Housing and Community Development that totaled $1.7 million for 17 houses of worship. And then we were able to, in that, to provide what I call catalytic dollars for the market analysis feasibility study. We were able to pay for a development consultant to be with them for 6 months. We were able to also provide grant dollars in the form of recoverable grants that will help them in the next phase of the project. So that's why the cohort, the fundraising for the cohort is more beneficial, because what it does is it gives, and we provided 6 months of training. We provided 6 months of training as well. And what the training does, it equips you along with the development consultant walking beside you so that you can cast the vision that you have and then flesh it out by having a market analysis feasibility study and doing the next phase of pre-development, which will call for you. It could be zoning, it could be organizational development, it could be a variety of different things.
But I will say that, we have about another half hour, and I don't think Reverend Joseph can say no to me if we were to ask him to allow us to set up another Zoom to have more discussion about this in order to help the masjids to get to the point where they're comfortable, because this is a big investment, Reverend Joseph, you know that, and the knowledge, it's a lot to learn. I can tell you, it's a lot. It took a lot of us to work together under the pressure that Imam Talib was putting us under in order to get this development done. And you're right, he was always in the community. And in Islam, we call them alliances. They definitely have to create those alliances. Now, I'm going to try not to stop you because I want you to get through your presentation. Go ahead.
So
otherwise, you're going to be obligated to come back.
So I have a few more slides I want to talk about. So here's some questions for you to consider before doing development. Okay. We talked about this a little. Do you have a separate entity for development? That's a question that you need to answer. Do you expect cash flow from the development, or are you willing to subsidize the project or just break even? What type of housing community facility will you develop? What is the targeted market? Do you have an economic empowerment interest? What do I mean by economic empowerment interest? Do you want to do something that is going to help to close the wealth gap, for an example? So do you have an economic empowerment issue? Do you want to create jobs? Do you, as a part of the community development project, do you want to do a local business? That's a training, that's a vocational piece, etc. I mentioned this earlier. Do you have site control of the land to develop your vision? And do you want to maintain ownership in that site control? All right. Do you expect to have a role in the development? Are you going to be a co-developer versus a partnership development opportunity? And do you have a development team and a main point of contact in place? I mentioned this, and I say this to all faith leaders. Have a compelling faith story that fuels your development journey so that when you get weary, and you will get weary, have something that you can lean on. In my case, I lean on the story of Nehemiah. That is because the story of Nehemiah has helped me in the development process. It has helped others find a faith story, I call it the roadmap for grounding for yourself that you can use, that can help you, because you're going to have naysayers. Development is hard because you got to remember who you're working for. You got to remember who this is unto. And when it gets hard, you can't sit down. You got to keep thriving forward. So find yourself a faith story that you can hang your heart on, because it's going to be important for you. Here are a few examples of what we did, and I'm going to do now the speed reading through this piece, because I'm answer any other questions that may come up. Here's a project.
Let me stop you for a second. 1 second, Reverend, because
Sure.
we do, you know, I want to just say how important that piece that you just said. And I just want to say to the community that's listening, one of the common denominators, the constant remembrance and reminder that was discussed in our board meetings, Imam Talib brought up many times, was our leaders and pioneers that went before us. So many of them envisioned this day that we would be doing this kind of business, and that kept us going. Is not to disappoint our pioneers that made so many sacrifices for us and gave their last and all so that we could be here today. So I want to that's really important, because you're right. Many days I know that I wanted to give up, but Imam Talib and the board, all of them continue to talk about our leaders, our pioneers, and all that they have been waiting for. And some of them are still alive and some of them have passed on. We have an obligation. We owe them a debt, and we are trying to pay that debt. So,
and you know what I would add to that? You owe subsequent generations.
That's right.
The opportunity for something for them to hang their hat on. You owe them. You owe them the opportunity to see what it means to really impact community.
That's right.
And how to actualize your worship in your living.
Exactly.
So we owe that as well. This is the Macedonian. This is out in Arlington, Virginia. They did 36 units. They did training. We helped them with what's called LIHTC credit equity, with 3.4 million in low income housing tax credits. This project here is up on Georgia Avenue. It's called the Emory Beacon of Light. We help them in terms of doing pre-development grants support, and help them to, and here's an interesting story about this one. So I talk about being a good community partner. Their project was delayed because the Historic Preservation Society said that the front facade of this worship facility had to remain, and they wanted to stop them from building. It cost an extra year and an extra $1 million. So it's important to understand the development will be trying at times. That's why it's important to have a faith story. This was Matthews Memorials over in Southeast, one of the first projects that we worked with. And one of the things that I've always appreciated this project about was, because now we didn't see the importance of this then, but we see it now. Berry Farms is being redeveloped right now. All right. 35 units in this spot was there for residents of Berry Farms to move into a new place. All right. So, you know, that was foreshadowing what was about to take place in the community. And so it's important to understand that we want to make sure, and if you look at this, I'm not going to get on my soapbox about Hope 6 and the new communities projects and all of that, but I would tell you it's important to understand the need for using what we have to help our communities. This project here, Israel Manor, is over in Northeast DC, over off Saratoga Avenue, Rhode Island Avenue. They have a unique spot. They built 47 units of senior housing on the backside of their property. They have a clinic, a partnership with a Unity clinic, and they built a banquet hall on top of the clinic that they rent out. So that's again, being able to create a mixed use project with their work. This one is over in Southeast. It is Trinity Plaza, one of our first partners with the Far Southeast Community Development Corporation. They put, instead of the coffee shop and the cleaners, they have a pharmacy and a daycare on the first floor. It's right there at Atlantic Street and South Capitol Street in Southeast. 49 residential units up top. This one is set to open. It has not opened yet. It's going to focus in on moms with HIV. Under 40% of the AMI. This one is actually in Clinton, Maryland. We have worked hard to help them to move forward. And I talk about municipalities and the work of being able to do this. So in Prince George's County just developed what we call a housing trust fund with an amount. And before then, it was nil to none. So houses of worship trying to do work in Prince George's County or build affordable housing couldn't do it. The East of the River Clergy Police Community Partnership was one of our first, actually the first project that we did that was in collaboration with a local house of worship. It served 30 reentry citizens and now serves formerly homeless families. And what I like to talk about this project is, so they're now in the current cohort and they're going to develop that whole block from that corner of the apartment building to where the church sits. They're going to do a whole redevelopment of that.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's important. The Roundtree Residence is a 91 unit senior housing place that's over in Southeast with Allen Chapel. I mean, there's a couple more I just thought about I need to add to this slide because we have one that abuts this that's done by Emmanuel over in the same area in Southeast, and their properties kind of touch each other. But it's an important affordable housing zone that they've created on that end off of Alabama Avenue. I like to tell this story about St. Martin's. If you look to the right of the slide, there's an older building that you see there. This was a development that was done when that building, when this project first started, where you see that older building on the right, it was over here, all the way over here to the left. In order for the project to work, they didn't realize it until they started construction, that they had to move the older building to the right in order to build the new construction. Wow. And so again, lessons learned in development. You know, there's an unexpected thing that will take place, and that's why you got to have a faith story to hang your hat on, because the journey can become weary. There's a white paper that we have. I believe it's found on our website, Let Us Rise Up and Build. In addition to, there's our policy team created a paper called Leveraging the Property Owned by Faith-Based Organizations to Create Affordable Homes and Public Benefit. You can visit our website, enterprisecommunity.com/faith-based development initiative. My information is there as well. See, I told you I wasn't going to be a long-winded preacher tonight.
I have a couple questions. In the assessment, is the lingo, the development lingo in there? Is that language in there? And the reason I'm asking is because one of the audience is asking, can we get a list of all the community development terms that you are using? And I wanted to know, because I don't remember exactly what the assessment, it's been so long since we used it. But is some of that lingo, some of those terms are in there. Do you know what
they are? Yeah, those questions, they're there in the form of questions. Yeah, they are there in the form of questions. And you get, yeah, they are there. And I can, Muhammad, I can send you just a list of the terms like I've used tonight, and with definitions. But yes.
And I want to say to the audience that if you are in a masjid that is looking or has already owned land and is looking to develop, and you want a copy of the assessment, you can write me at studyalislam@gmail.com and I'll send you a copy of it, because I do have a copy of it, thanks to the Reverend. I will send it to you. So you could just write me at studyalislam@gmail.com, or you can contact Reverend Joseph. Reverend Joseph, the next question is, how does land banks and infill development properties figure in a faith-based CDC?
And that's a very good question. And the opportunity that that comes through the benefit of land banking.
Please
Is,
explain what is land banking
I'm
first.
sorry, so that is so, some municipalities have taken it upon themselves to allow an entity to create what I called an oversight organization that brings, for the lack of a better word, brings together land that is unused and puts it, think of it, putting it in a pot, and then being able to create an opportunity for somebody to buy the land that's in the bank to do development on it. It keeps that land from being gobbled up by developers who would then use it, maybe not for affordable purposes. And it creates a fairness, as it were, especially if there is not a lot of available land in a particular municipality, that it gives a fair system to allow people to be able to have access to it, to develop it, to bid on it, to buy it, etc. And the entity that does it normally is some kind of housing connected organization that understands the need for housing, understands the need for affordable development. And so,
go ahead. No,
so I was
go
going
ahead.
to say, so if in fact that an entity, let's say that you don't own any land, you are a community development corporation, you don't own any land, but you really want to figure out a way to get involved. Either you're going to partner with, a mosque, you're going to partner with the house of worship, you're going to partner, or you decide that your entity wants to go the way of connecting with someone who is operating a land bank, and to figure out how you can create a relationship and a purchase opportunity there. So that is how that can play a role in that. Generally, when land banking is being done, there's also a plan that the municipality has and the entity has come up with on how it's going to be, that land is going to be developed.
The next question, what is the average split in these joint venture projects?
That's a very good question, and that's a very good question, and that depends. And so, think of it like this.
Let's make a distinction though before you answer that question, because let's make a distinction between ownership and split.
So ownership, I'm staying in the deal. If I'm staying in the deal, and I'm going to continue to own my land, in my joint venture agreement document, I'm going to create how much I'm going to get for how much percentage of value I'm going to get for the value of my land. Then I'm also going to say that how much ownership that I want to have. So, the general people ask us all the time, what is the general? Well, in my mind, the developer can't do the deal without my land.
That's right.
So I want to maintain a majority ownership in this partnership. All right. Now, it may mean that I may end up having to be at a 51-49 split because they are bringing their balance sheet to the table. Right. They are using their money. But now, if I'm bringing my land and my money and some money, and I only need the balance sheet because I've never done development, then I'm going to negotiate how much that's going to be from the beginning. And I didn't say this term, but when you're doing an affordable housing agreement, there comes a turnkey moment, all right? When those tax credits have to be refinanced, and you should be positioned to become the majority owner at that particular time, if you can't do it in the beginning.
So I want to stress here, because we're coming to the close, that this is faith-based projects, but they're under a CDC, which is separate from the Masjid.
That's right.
It's connected, but it's separate. It has its own board. it's and it functions together. It functions as a partner to the masjid, but the business entity is under the CDC.
That's right.
And that
That's
is to protect the house of worship from any legal ramifications that come. So, Reverend, I want to just first of all give you the last word on this. I want to also ask, with almost 70 witnesses, that if we need you to come back, that you will come back. You are a friend to Masjid Muhammad, and Imam Talib has spoken on many of your panels as one of those faith-based leaders.
Yeah.
I can tell you that this is not easy work. You need a partner, and though you need legal advice, you have to have some trust in the partnership. Trust doesn't have to have the forefront, but you need to feel comfortable about the partnership that you're going into.
Yeah, that's why I said that, you know, each of the categories I've talked about are training by themselves. All right. If you think about a joint venture agreement, I've heard people describe it as a marriage, and that you have to be careful of choosing a partner. You do, because you're going to be together during the duration of this project. And if you don't like each other, you're not going to have a good partnership. And if you don't have a good partnership, you're not going to necessarily have a good outcome. So it's important, you know, and one of the things that we teach people, and you come to our trainings, you hear us say that it's important for you to shop around. It's important for you to interview people to see if there is a connection. You might start out talking to somebody who sounds good because that's your first date. But then you go out on a date with somebody else and you're like, you know what they said was all right, but what you're saying makes more sense. And then again, you create the relationship so that you can have this partnership. I want to share this with you. If you heard nothing else I've said tonight, that is so important for you to make a decision to do something.
Yes.
But don't do it without knowledge. Don't do it without insight. And by all means, don't do it without understanding. Because development is important, it's expensive, and if you're not careful, it can burn you. So you can do it. Find your faith story. Hang with your team, learn your information, and then go forth and do what God has put in your hand and heart to do.
And it's a commitment. I mean, you have to have leadership with vision, with drive. We met on so many hours. There's no, I don't want to come to the meeting. This is too early. Don't call me on no emergency meetings. I'm with my family. It's none of that. It's you in it.
Yeah.
You got to be committed to it. I'm hoping that this is from my boss, Imam Talib Sharif. He's saying, Alhamdulillah, excellent presentation, Reverend Williams and Sister Fitrah. May its significant value be maximized amongst the most needed. I think that's him, because that sounds like his word.
Well, thank you.
So I want to recognize his words. And if it isn't, it's somebody that he has driven with the whip, I'll tell you. Because
he's a good man, though. He's a good man, and we really appreciate. We appreciate the work that you all are doing. We are happy to partner with you. We are happy to again to build our alliances together, so that for the good of the community, through the lens of faith, that we can really make something happen. So I look forward to it. I will tell you. Now, I will tell you this: you won't see me no more for the rest of this year. I'm going into hibernation. I know I'm about as big as a bear, so I'm going in the cave so I can hibernate for a little bit. But but I won't be like the bear. I'll come out while winter is still going on. But I will be away for a couple of weeks.
Well, first of all, Reverend, the rest of the year is only a couple of weeks. So let's put time in perspective, okay? So you're not going to scare me with, I won't see you for the rest of this year. It's not but a couple of weeks. But anyway, I want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to say thank you on behalf of Imam Talib and all that you have done and helped us in the beginning process, and our board, on behalf of our board, on behalf of the executive staff team that you made yourself available to, all the seminars that we attended, the knowledge, the information. I want to say again to everyone or anyone out there in the Masjid, we encourage you not to be afraid. Knowledge is powerful. Masjid Muhammad, the nation's mosque, has just broken ground on the Clara. You have access to information, and you just have to reach out. But if you are interested in the assessment, which is the 9-page assessment that the Reverend referenced, I would say to you, before you do anything, you need to take this assessment with your board. So I just want to say again, all 3 of these programs can be heard again on Study Al-Islam YouTube page, or visit studyalislam.com. Masjid Muhammad's website is being updated and upgraded, but you will be able to hear it on the Masjid website as well, thenationsmosque.org. So again, I say thank you for joining, and I pray that these series on building community wealth has provided you insight into the possibilities, a pathway to success, encouragement to achieve, inspired by the promise of Allah. If you work with vision, purpose, faith, and sincere intent, you can accomplish what you will. Thank you, and be safe. Reverend, be safe wherever you're going, but 3 weeks is not a long time, so I will be back at your doorstep.
I know you will. God bless you all, and thank you again so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, your sister and friend, Fitrah Muhammad. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you.